In this video, I'm going to go over the Cisco iOS command line interface. So up till now, you've probably just been using the GUI interface, the config. So I'm going to pull up a router here. And so if we go into the router, right, you have the physical view where you can do the cards and power. This config view, well, you've been using for a while to make changes. One thing you may not have noticed is at the bottom here is the iOS commands that are being run when you interact with this interface. So if you select this gigabit Ethernet 00, you'll see below you would have typed enable, then configure terminal, and then interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0, and then you would be in the config interface mode. So enable gets you into a higher level. Think of it like an admin command prompt, right? So when you first go into the router or switch, right, it'll have the greater than sign for the cursor, and that is just a basic entry point for the router or switch. You go into enable mode, and you get the hashtag at the cursor, and that tells you you're in more of an admin or elevated mode, privileged mode. Now, we didn't have to type in a password because no password is set right now on this. You can enable, we should say, you could configure a password to be able to get into the enable mode. And that's just, typing enable space password and the password that you want. And I'll show you that in a little bit. But then configure terminal, right? That is where you do a lot of the main commands, especially when you want to get into dealing with any interface on a switch or router. When you're on the interface, it'll say config-if, right? And then you could do the interface options. So like I say, you can do all kinds of things here in this config tab, but that's not real world. This is real world in the command line. And to get that is to go to the CLI tab, the command line interface tab, and you'll see that the commands that we were looking at on the other tab have been run here in on this router, right, to get us to the gigabit Ethernet 00. So I'm going to type end, right, and you see that it brings me to the hash sign. But if I type exit, right, this is where you would normally connect into the router. This is what it would look like. You would have to hit return to start, and now you're at the command line command prompt, as you'll see, with the greater than. So we're not in privileged mode. One thing you can do in iOS is hit the question mark, and you get a list of commands that are available at that prompt. So I can do different session numbers, so I can connect to different sessions on this router, or if this was a switch, the same thing. I can disconnect. I can go into enable, so turn on privileged commands. Like I said, enter into like an admin mode is by typing enabled. I can exit. Right, I can exit this and go back to the start. I can log out. I can run a ping command. I can resume an active network connection, right? I can show, right? So, and other things like trace route to here, but show is a good one. So if I type show space question mark, right? I've got a whole list of things that I can show. I can show the clock. I can show the ARP table. Can show encryption modules, the flash hosts, right? IP information, sessions. There's even more, right? So I can do more, and I can show the users that are on this terminal lines, VLAN switch, so any VLAN status, and the VTP or the VLAN database, right? So there's a lot of things that I can do, but let's just do the show version. So one thing about Cisco iOS is you only need to type the number of letters that identify a unique command. So version, right? A V, right? There's 3 commands that start with V, but there's only one command, show VE. So if I type show VE and hit enter, it'll show me the version information, right? And it'll give me all kinds of information, but it runs that command, right? I could do it again, but I could type show version, the whole thing, and it shows the exact same thing. But because I typed VE, right? So if I type V, it says I can't understand because there's 3 commands that start with V. But if I do an up arrow, I can do the command again and then type it E, and then it'll show the version, right? Because there's only one command that starts show space VE. It knows what command to run, so you get saved on typing. Just like right now, we can go into enable mode. If we look, there's only one command that starts with EN. So I want to enter in enable mode, I can just type EN. And then now I'm in enable mode because you can see the hashtag, right? So now I can run the question mark again and I'll get a different set of commands because before I wasn't in privileged mode, but now I am. And so now I have a whole slew of new commands, right? And also things that do different things too, right? So one here is configure, to enter configuration mode. That's really important. And then also we've got the show command down here. This is another important one. And then the write command. So we can write what we've done to memory, right? And save it. So let's do config. For configure, right, or configure, we'll do configure question mark. And so there's only one command with configure. I can configure the terminal, right? So if I do config terminal, actually I could just do configure T, right, because there's only one command with a T. And so now I'm in configuration mode, right? So this indicates the config, that I'm in config mode with the hashtag. And now if I do a question mark, I have a whole nother set of commands that I can do. One of which is the interface, right? So I want to configure an interface, or I want to configure IP routes, things like that, or IPv6 routes, right? Let's see here. Oh, did I pass it? Okay. Let's see here. There's quite a bit. So, but let's do IP, right? So if we do IP question mark, right? So we have a lot of information. So we can do DHCP, right? So configure DHCP server and relay parameters on this router. We can do a route. We can establish static routes by doing IP route. So let's do IP route question mark, right? So then it's telling me that IP route and then the IP information, right? And the destination prefix, right? So so you want to type in your route. So whatever route you want, say you want to go to the 192.168.1.0 network at the 255.255.255.0, and you want it to go out serial, let's do fast Ethernet. Oh, actually, this is gigabit. Sorry, gigabit Ethernet. If I hit the tab command, it will complete if it knows, right? All right, default route without gateway may impact performance. So, right, so I put the interface, right, instead of a gateway is what they're telling me. So this is probably not a great way to do a route, but it is a route because I don't have anything configured. So what I can do though is I want to end this, all right, and I go back here and I want to do a show question mark, right? So what I wanted to do is show that you can show the running config, right? So and we'll see that it's the only R command, so we can just do show R, and now it shows the running config. And if we go down, we'll see that we have an IP route that I've typed in. I can copy this and then go here and do a config T, remember, get it in configure terminal mode, and then I can do no, and then a paste the no IP route, all that information I just typed in, and hit enter, and then let's do an end, and then do a show R, right? And now the route is gone, right? So usually typing no in front of a command removes the command from the configuration. So that's how you make your changes. And then say I made all my changes and I was happy with it, I would just do WR for write, or I could just do the whole command, do write, and it'll build the configuration, save it to memory. If I do a question mark, right, so write, I could actually just do W, right, and it will write the command because it's the only W command. All right, so let's do something a little better here. So let's go into config T. All right, so config terminal mode. We'll do our question mark again, and so we can do our interface, or let's see here, DHCP. Yeah, let's just do interface. So interface and gigabit. I just type the G, then hit the tab, and then it'll type in gigabit 00. So I'm going to the first gigabit interface on the router here, and so now I'm in interface configuration mode, config-if, and so then I can show with the question mark all the commands that I can do with the interface. So there's quite a few, but some of the more important ones, right, is duplexing, turn duplexing on, putting IP on here, right, shut down, that's a good one, right? If it's shut down, it can't communicate. So what I want to do though is do IP, because I want to set an IP address. And so now I can do IP, and then I see the next command I would want for setting an IP address is the address, because it sets the IP address. So I do address, Alright, then I do question mark, and then it just tells me that I need the IP address, right? Or DHCP if it's assigned by DHCP. So I could do DHCP, right? And it'll get a dynamic IP address if there's a DHCP server around. But let's just go ahead and assign it an IP address, right? And we'll go there, question mark, and see. So the next part after the IP address is the subnet mask. So then we'll put in the subnet mask, do a question mark, and the next command is carriage return, right? So we've got our complete command, and so now we just set the IP address on gigabit Ethernet 0/0. So then we can check that we can go end, right? It takes us back out, and we do a show running config, right? And our interface gigabit 00 now has an IP address, right? But it is shut down. So we need to go back in and turn it on because it's currently off. All right, so let's actually show that. So let's go ahead and put a switch out here, and we'll get a cable, and we'll connect it to gigabit Ethernet 00, and we'll connect it to gigabit 01, and you see that it's shut down right now. It's red, right? So let's go back in here. We'll do a config T, and we'll do interface gigabit Ethernet 00. So now we're on this interface, and then we can do no shut down, right? So I hit the tab and it completes, right? Completes things. So now it's going up. As you can see, it's going green, right? And eventually it'll connect. So now if I do end, I go back out, and so I want to write this and save this to memory. So I'm going to hit W, and it's going to build the configuration, and it's okay. So now we've written that configuration, and it's saved. So now the router can talk to the switch, and the switch can talk to the router. It's got an IP address. And then let's see. So right now there's no enable password. So if we go to config T, we can type enable password and Cisco, right? Cisco. Right, so this will require a password of Cisco when we enter enable mode, right? So if I exit and exit, so now when I go in, and if I do enable mode, now I need a password, right? So I'll type in Cisco, I can get in, but now let's just say I need to change the password, right? So config T, I can do enable password pass, right? So now we can do, and we can get out, and if I go into enable, now I have to type pass to get in. But let's just say I just want to get rid of the password altogether, so I go in config mode and do no enable password. And now if I do end and end, oops, I'm glad I did that. So this is a problem when you type a command that doesn't exist, or you type a wrong command, or you type something incorrect. By default, Cisco tries to do a domain lookup, and it takes forever. So what we need to do is disable this feature unless you absolutely need it. By default, this should be turned off. So I'm going to have to wait here for quite a while for it to do its search. and finally come up with nothing found. But it takes away our cursor and we can't do anything. Yeah, this is always so much fun. So the first thing I want to do is go to config T, and then I want to go no IP domain dash lookup. Now I've turned that feature off, right? So if I do an end, right, it says unknown command and it doesn't hang the computer anymore. So now I just do an exit, and then I can do enable mode, and I don't need a password because I got rid of it. And then I want to write this configuration because I don't want to lose the fact that I turned off the domain lookup feature, because I definitely don't want that to happen. So that's really the first thing you should do when you get on a device. In fact, let's do it here on the switch here and go to the command line interface. And we're at the switch. Once again, the greater than symbol, the question mark still works on the switch, right? So we'll go into enable mode. We'll do config. Now let's just do this, do a question mark, right? So CON is the least that you have to type for config. Well, CONF, right? So CONF is the most unique. So CNOFT will get us into config mode. That's the least amount of typing that you have to type. And then we're going to go no IP domain dash lookup and turn that off, immediately. So then we can do an end just to test it, right? So it works fine, and exit. So all right, so we go to enable mode, we can write it, and we've saved that information. But as you can see in the command line interface, if you hit the question mark, you can figure out what's there, what you can do, right? And what's available. And then config mode is one where you're making all the changes, or it gets you into a lot of areas. The show mode shows you a lot of information. No disables things. Write is when you want to save the configuration. You can go into VLANs and configure VLANs here in the enable mode. So like if I go to VLAN 11, right? VLAN 11. VLAN. What can I do with VLANs? Database. Oh, these are older ones. So database. And so now I'm in the VLAN database, and then with the question marks, so I can add a VLAN. So here, VLAN 11. And so it added VLAN 11 for me with the name of VLAN 0011. And so I can do all kinds of things with the VLANs in here, like delete or modify. So I can do VLAN 34. So I created VLAN 34, and I don't want that. Let's just do no VLAN 34. So it deleted the VLAN for me, right? So as you can see, the command line is fairly easy to use. Use the question mark to learn about it and test it out, see what's available. But then you can also use the config tab to learn commands. So just like before, I went to the VLAN database, right? It tells you, VLAN database, like I typed before. That's how you get in there. Adding and removing, it'll show you the commands, right? So if I do a 12, right, add, it's VLAN 12 named VLAN 12, right? So that's how it created that from the GUI. If I hit the fast Ethernet, right? So it goes into config terminal and then types in interface fast Ethernet, and now I'm in that Ethernet, right? If I want to assign it to VLAN 11, right? So I assign it to VLAN 11, it shows me the command was, if I'm in interface mode, on that interface, I type switch port access VLAN 11. Or I could switch it to switch port access VLAN 12, right? And so those are the things that I can do here on the switch with the ports. And same with the gigabit, I could put it into trunk mode, right? So if I go here, right? So it went to the interface, and then once you're in the interface configuration mode, you type switch port mode trunk. So this creates a trunk mode so that all VLANs on that switch go through that port. So now with trunk mode enabled, you have all the VLANs going through on that port. Now you would have to configure the router to handle all those VLANs with sub interfaces and that. So actually, so we go back here and we go conf t, all right. We want to go to interface, interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0.1, right? Because we need to create subnet interfaces. So now we're on the sub interface, as you can see, right? We're not in the IF, we're in a sub IF, right? And so now we can create this interface, and so we can do a question mark on there, right? And so here, because we're dealing with trunk modes and VLANs, we need to deal with encapsulation. So encapsulation, EN, right? And then we do a question mark. We have different styles, right? You know, you have the .1Q, which that's the on this 2960, that's the standard version of encapsulation for VLANs. So that's the one we want. The others you can use for other devices, but for what we're going to use, we're going to do the .1Q, and then a question mark, and then so now what VLAN is going to go on this sub interface? So we're going to go with VLAN 11, right? And then we're going to do question mark, and then we're going to make this a native. And now we're done with that. But now we need to do an IP address on this, so we're going to do 192.168.11.254, right? Then 255.255.255.0, right? Oops, I forgot address. All right, so now we assign the IP address on there, and so then we're going to exit out of this interface. And then we do the up arrow, and I want to do the second interface, sub interface. I want to do the encapsulation. The other VLAN on there that I want off the switch is VLAN 1. So this interface will do VLAN 1. And actually, I should have done this a little different, but that's okay. And we'll do this. Actually, let's fix it. All right. So I'm going to exit this one, and I'm going to go let's see, no interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0.1. Okay, so we put that one down. And let's do interface gigabit Ethernet 00.11, right, for VLAN 11. So then we want to do the encapsulation on dot 11 to 11. We want the IP address 192.168.11.254.255.255. All right, and now we want to exit. Now we want to do dot 1, and we want to do IP. Let's do encapsulation is 1. Oh, okay. Exit. So interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0.2. We're going to go no encapsulation. Okay, so then now we can exit, and we can do no interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0.2. Now we want to go back to 1. We want to do encapsulation for there. Then we want to do our IP address. So let's just say it's on the now we'll leave it for right now, because actually interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0, we want to do no IP address, right? Because we had an IP address on there in the 1 range. So now we can go back to gigabit. Oh, exit. INT gigabit 0/0.1. So now we're on the sub interface. Now we can do an IP address 192.168.1.254. Because we had that on the 0/0, and you can't do that. You can't have 2 IPs in the same range on 2 interfaces. So now we've got that, and so we can end, and we can do our write, and then we can show our running config. So there's no domain IP lookup. We got that. We have the gigabit Ethernet 0/0 is off, right? It has no IPs. Our interface 0/0.1 is set for VLAN 1 traffic, and our 0.11 interface is set up for VLAN 11 traffic. So that's how you would handle VLANs on the router. So you have to set up each interface, and for whatever reason you have to have at least 2 interfaces set up with VLANs if you're doing VLANs off a trunk line to get it to work. Even if you're only going to use like VLAN 11 in our lab. But so on the switch, right, so the interface that it's plugged into is trunk mode, right? And then on the router, our interface that's plugged into the trunk on the switch is configured for VLANs. So I know that was really fast and really quick, but go through the command lines and test it out, use the question mark, see what you can come up with, and good luck.